Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 302 of Optimal Living Advice. I'm your host, Greg Audino, and this is the show on which I take listener questions about all kinds of struggles they might be facing and offer professional support and guidance, maybe some words of advice too. This question we have today is a really interesting one. Now, I don't think it's uncommon to hear of a people pleaser who's trying to show up for themselves a bit more, but today's question comes from a listener who doesn't struggle with people pleasing himself, but rather sees it in his wife and wants to help her through it from an outside perspective. So let's hear his question and talk about it as we optimize your life. For as long as I've known her, my wife has struggled with being a people pleaser. She's never really seeked out help for this because she doesn't think it's worth going to therapy over. I want to respect that and not push her into therapy, but I do see how this people-pleasing shows up and limits her potential. I'm wondering how to help her out with this as her husband. Are there things that I can do to make her feel more empowered and like less of a pushover? All right. Thank you so much, Asker. A concerned spouse looking out for their better half's well-being. You love to see it. Now, before we start talking about how to support and uplift a people-pleaser, let's just begin by covering the bases on how people-pleasing originates in the first place. This way you can maybe have some more understanding about where your wife is coming from, and I'm sure you'll start connecting the dots as I talk and you think about who she is and what her life has been like. So, more often than not, you could assume that people-pleasing is a learned response from childhood. Big surprise there, I know. Kids who are made to feel as though their feelings and opinions don't matter. Kids who are overly praised for doing exactly what they're told to do. Kids whose parents didn't take full responsibility for their own emotions and made their children feel as though they had to act in a certain way in order to determine the parents' happiness. Kids who were constantly told they're an inconvenience in some way. Kids whose parents were reluctant or unable to fully express themselves to one another or maybe some other authority figures, etc. List goes on. And all these things can, not do, but can lead to people-pleasing tendencies that follow these kids into adulthood. Maybe you can trace some of these ideas back to your wife's upbringing. And basically what's happening under the surface here is that these people, I say these people like I'm not one of them, have constructed the idea that in order to maintain a sense of safety and security, they need to always honor and put first the feelings of others. If others are calm, then they're in the clear and in the familiar position of dealing with their own feelings by themselves. Whether the subconscious thought is that everyone else is going to bully you for having opposing ideas, or that everyone else is just going to be a big baby and complain if you have opposing ideas, or anything in between. It feels uncomfortable to express yourself. It feels uncomfortable to take up space, to ask for what you want or need. And sadly, it's no surprise that going to therapy doesn't feel worth it to your wife. She may very well feel like it's burdensome to take up the therapist's time with such a thing that she could just as easily handle on her own, as she probably always has. It might even be a point of pride for her to feel as though she can do this, as a lot of people pleasers can get very good at regulating their own emotions. But this isn't necessarily ideal if it's paired with taking responsibility for other people's feelings, or the inability to set boundaries, for example. So it's really great that you've submitted this question, Asker, because it might be hard for your wife to even know if she needs help with this, let alone ask for it. In this way, people-pleasing can be about not just refusing to ask for help, but actively repelling it when it's available. So we're starting to see the shadow, the sad part of this trait, which is often thought of as one of the better psychological shortcomings we could have. Even though we know this isn't ideal, somehow it's often regarded as cute because of how much care there seems to be for others. People-pleasing can be very harmful, though. So, what is the spouse of a people-pleaser to do? Well, you don't have to force your wife into therapy that she doesn't want, but being that you know her so well, what you can do is recognize her patterns and just help her or champion her in asking for what she wants. So start by asking yourself when her people-pleasing tends to show up and why. Maybe she has a hard time speaking up at work because she's worried about hearing no, being denied, or being seen as foolish. If you have kids, maybe she wants them to constantly feel safe and has a hard time making time for herself if she already feels they need, or if she feels they need even the slightest thing. Look out for these types of habits from her, what they say about her values, and how she might be denying herself the fulfillment of those values. And you can then start to help her take the necessary steps to get what she's after. You might see that she would like a promotion at work, so you can remind her of the specific ways that it would be beneficial and how she's earned it, and offer to help her craft her pitch that she might make to her boss. Or if a big goal of hers is to kind of pacify the kids by waiting on them hand and foot, maybe you can go out of your way to schedule and put together instructions for a sitter that can look after them while you two take a weekend away. And mind you, you can practice this in small ways too. Help her to set boundaries every time a friend asks for her help when you can tell she's burnt out or doesn't have time and would deny this request if people-pleasing wasn't getting the best of her. This doesn't need to be forcible, but you can, gently remind her that her friend likely has a lot of other outlets for help, or can maybe do it herself, or is entirely understanding of your wife being exhausted and wouldn't want her to inconvenience herself if she's not up for it. And then you might offer ways that she could politely say no to this request. So essentially, you're helping her understand that there's a lot of space between asserting herself and being met with resistance. Certainly in healthy relationships worth having. And you're helping her to bridge that gap slowly. Theoretically, she will benefit from having experiences like these that redefine what it looks like to state what she needs and the response that comes with it. The more she can be exposed to the fact that people are patient with her, that people want what's best for her, and that she has the power to ask for things in a way that honors the feelings of both herself and the other party, the easier it'll become for her to recognize and manifest the things that she wants. And thank you once again to the asker for submitting this great question today. Like I said at one point, this can all be done pretty gently, rather than forcibly. Ultimately, your wife will determine the pace at which she's comfortable with receiving this type of support, and it's important to respect that as opposed to stepping into the driver's seat of what at the end of the day is her life. We want to be supportive of others, yet not be so commandeering as to think that we know what's best for them all the time. Now, everyone else, if you've got a question you would like help with, go ahead and email it to me, and I would be more than happy to take a look. Email advice@oldpodcast.com. advice@oldpodcast.com if you'd like some help and for your question to be featured on the show. Don't be shy. And we have reached the end now, everyone. So have a great rest of your day. I thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you again next time, where your optimal life awaits.